All right. I'm going to call the meeting to order as soon as Dennis tells me we're ready to go. And we're ready to go. So welcome to the Board of Finance regular meeting for June 13th, 2024. If you would rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I think I know everybody in the room. I don't think there's anybody here for public comment, but I will call for public comment if anybody wishes to make any. And if not, hi, Anthony. Welcome.
Hi.
Anthony Musto, the town treasurer, is with us this evening. So we're going to look at the treasurer's report first.
Evening, Madam Chair.
How are you?
Just fine. How are you doing?
Riding the manic wave, sir.
So we just sent this out today. I don't know if everybody got a chance to look at it. I apologize for the late notice, but we did some changes to the, there was a
The mic's gotta be.
microphone. Is that?
You gotta plug it into the button.
They change these things on you. It's difficult to keep up with technology for those of us over 50. So, as I was saying, I just got this out to you guys this morning. The T-bills for Janie came due, and we didn't have the yield on them because they didn't tell us what it was, buying them at a discount, et cetera, so I was waiting for that. A little bit of information just to finalize this. Otherwise, it's the standard report. Things are still going well. Interest rates are high for us, which is good on the income end, obviously. For the year, we are now double what actually the estimate was $2 million. I think I didn't update it. But I keep hearing it's $2 million, but it's double what I had originally anticipated, which is great. And we still got a month left for another, probably $250,000, depending on how things work out. Infinex, we're still on the ladder. The one matures every month. One matured yesterday, I think. And other than that, it's just the standard monthly report. So,
Awesome. Anybody have any
if anyone
questions?
has questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Last time we spoke, you were talking about moving stuff away from M&T to Newtown.
Yes.
And are you transitioning more stuff or?
It's in progress, yeah. Yeah,
Awesome. Thank you.
but, okay. All right, well, thank you very much. See you guys
Have a
later.
good evening.
Oh, and as always, I talked, I can't remember who it was. There's still a standing offer if anyone wants to talk to me offline, if you have any questions once you get to review it or just in general, again, just contact me. I think I know the chairman and the clerk have my cell phone number, so if anybody wants to call me, that's fine. Enjoy.
Thank you. Okay, so here's the real reason we're all here tonight. I got a script. The resolution, which is the subject of this meeting, is available to the public on the town's website. I will like a motion and a second to read the title of the bond resolution in its entirety and to waive the reading of the remainder of the resolution, incorporating its full text into the minutes of this meeting. Thank you, Paul. And a second. Thank you, Scott. All those in favor of read the title and to waive the rest of the thing? Okay, we're all set with that. Paul, do you want to read the resolution?
Resolution 06-24-01, resolution appropriating $142,375,000 for the planning, design, demolition, construction, renovation, equipping, and furnishing of a new Hillcrest Middle School and authorizing the issuance of $142,375,000 bonds of the town to meet said appropriation and pending the issuance thereof, making of temporary borrowings for such purpose. Move its adoption.
Thank you, Paul. And a second? Thank you, Rosemary. All right. Whew. You can tell Dan that we did okay so far. All right. So with us this evening, we have representatives from Tecton Architects. They have been involved in the master plan, and they're here to talk to us about the Hillcrest Middle School grant application and the bond authorization to build a new middle school.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeff Wazinski. I'm a principal at Tecton Architects. With me tonight is Antonia Ciavarella, architectural designer. She'll speak to some of the educational programming aspects and design aspects of the project, and I'll cover kind of the highlights overall. I'm hoping that I'll be able to screen share my presentation. Okay, great. So I'm going to go to the table. Okay,
see.
Great. So
done.
for those that have been following the journey that we traveled for through the master plan and into this grant application, this is the micro schedule related to the grant application for the Hillcrest Middle School. So the area that you really need to focus on is we've been actively engaged in preparing educational specifications. There's probably three dozen or so grant checklist items that we're responsible for. The biggest one is the educational specifications and then the various different approvals from the town boards. So we've been working on that over the last several months, and the grant application typically is due June 30th. That's our target to submit the electronic grant application. So for the Hillcrest Middle School specifically, we're in the home stretch. We have all of the checklist items. We're finalizing an independent cost estimate as a requirement of the grant application. We have to have a third party to prepare a cost estimate based on the conceptual design and a UNIF format, which is a format that the state is looking for. So we're in relatively good shape with all the grant checklist items, and we're looking to submit those in the next week or so electronically to the state. So I mentioned the educational specifications, and it's a fairly lengthy document, but think of it as the playbook for your project. Everything that is required for the project should be described and is described in the educational specification. And the state looks at that as basically a narrative to your project. What do you want to include? What's your educational pedagogy? What are the enrollment projections? What are the spaces that you want to design in your building? What are the spaces you want to have? How do you want to operate the building? Everything related to the project. So what's important is this is a very inclusive document because they look at this for reimbursable items, right? So that's kind of your guidebook from the minute that you submit that grant application all the way through to the conclusion of construction for the project. So that's done and approved by the Board of Ed as required for the grant application. Some of these slides you may have seen before at some of the community presentations or the past board or council meetings, but this is a graphic representation of all the programmatic spaces that are going to be in the building. And Antonia will kind of speak to some of the key aspects of the 21st century kind of middle school and what's included in the conceptual design in a few slides here. This slide represents and distills down some of the major components of that grant checklist item. I touched upon enrollment projections. So, basically the state in a high level is looking for you to project out at least an 8-year window so that when you're designing your project, when you're designing your middle school, you know what the student count is going to be 8 years out. So that math, you take the projected enrollment and you multiply it by an allowable square foot per student, and that gets you the size of your building. And what's important is that you want to make sure that you stay within that size of the building, because then a large majority of your project is reimbursable as far as square footage. So there's a bunch of other checklist items, but I just wanted to touch on the few major ones. And I'm going to turn it over to Antonia just to touch on some of the educational aspects.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. So we are all here centered around students, right? And then supporting our faculty, supporting our students. Common mission throughout the district is you've got really talented educators, students that are passionate about education. So let's give them those 21st century learning environments to support all the talent that you have here. And why it matters is we're spending an increasing amount of our time indoors. 90% of our time often is indoors. And the evidence out there for these new progressive learning environments has shown that you can improve student academic achievement by as much as 25% over a baseline. So that percentage is huge. So that's kind of the mission around why we're all here. And through the course of our conversation with educators, we've always taken this evidence-based approach, right? What does the data tell us is most impactful in education, and how does that support the advanced pedagogy and curriculum that you have here in Trumbull? And so we'll see things like student belonging in middle schools can improve by 27% when you give them these spaces to really foster that sense of belonging that's missing. And these connections to nature, also such a dramatic shift from pre-COVID to now, has proven to reduce stress levels and increase focus and attention. So all of that is factored into our process. Jeff mentioned that there's this state worksheet that tells us how to calculate your square footage. So we have followed that using your student count of 826 students. We've plugged that in, and that gives us an allowable square footage from the state of 135. On top of that, we've added 7.5%. That incorporates things like your wall thicknesses, your mechanical spaces, things that the state spreadsheet doesn't factor in. So that together has given us our total of 145,884, and that's what you'll see reflected in the cost estimates. We have, as I've mentioned, had really in-depth creative programming conversations with your teachers in your middle school, and one of the areas we wanted to highlight for you is the auditorium performance space that is this multi-purpose, flexible space that allows for really creative either stage performances, theater in the round configurations, but it also allows flexibility with your CTE programs so that students that are making things in these shop classes can quickly access presentation space or expand their learning area if they're doing small group work. So lots of flexibility built into this space in particular, but also the plan as a whole. So this diagram you'll see is an idea where the adjacencies of this black box could be something that relates to the planetarium space that we know we have planned. It could be connected to the media center and those maker areas in that part of your building. And it could expand to the outdoor so that students working in the tech shop can spill out to an outdoor area to really work on their projects at a grander scale. Or the Black Box Theater itself could expand out into nature for outdoor performances.
Thank you, Antonia. So the next series of slides will just touch upon the site analysis, looking at this in particular. This slide is analyzing the existing conditions. So right in the center of your slide is the existing Hillcrest Middle School, and just identifying key components because this is a campus. We want to make sure we had several conversations related to fields, parking, access, traffic control at a preliminary levels to make sure that those would be included in the scope of the work. So we consciously had a working group working through what potential areas we could build and try to limit disruption to the existing students. So there's 3 obvious choices without further impacting the overall campus. The one that's currently the existing drop-off lane and parking. Option 2 would have been the JV baseball field, and then option 3, the lower portion of your slide there, which is the existing practice soccer field. So we went through this process and looked at it from, obviously this is an aerial looking at the same 3 sites and trying to place the building in a most logical position for when you're finished with the project, making sure it's beneficial to the campus overall, but also during construction, limiting disruption to the overall campus. So you can see here in this slide, there's about a 12 to 15 foot grade change from the existing floor level of the existing Hillcrest Middle School down to this field. So we came up with a concept, and again, the state grant application isn't looking for a finalized design. They're looking for concept and schematic plans that validate your construction costs, right? So in the budget for the project. So this certainly will evolve. It could be located in any of those 3 locations that I had explained. But for purposes of showing that we've done our due diligence, we're showing it here on this plan. So this is the existing plan, and the lower portion, the black outline shows or illustrates the footprint of what could be a new building, the new building. And you'll see a conceptual site plan here where you have the building, which is pushed further back on site in the light yellow. If you're looking at your handout, I am now on page 8, the bottom of page 8, with 2 distinct parking areas. Typically in today's educational facilities, we want to make sure that we have proper visibility, we have proper access, safety, security is controlled. There's a compartmentalization of kind of the site as well. So you'll see separate parking areas, visitor areas, separate bus and parent drop-off, and cleared distinct lines and travel paths to the center of the building, which would be a controlled entry. So the building is further back on the site with parking and fields up front with good access from some of the programmatic elements to the existing fields. Of course, we're preserving JV baseball field, the varsity softball field, and we're replacing what we're disturbing for the soccer field up front with adjacent parking. So we think it could be beneficial to the community. It has adjacent parking as well. So this next slide illustrates the diagram that we were trying to achieve, starting from the top left of this slide, looking at possible increasing the queue length to try to alleviate some of the traffic congestion on the site. I won't go into too much of the detail of the design, but separate parent drop-off, the parking areas, preserving the fields, and adding and replacing fields that we disturbed. So this is just more of a detailed view of this area. You can see the separation and what it could look like. And again, just illustrating what could happen. These certainly could flip in either direction, but you have plenty of space to properly park and properly separate, while at the same time providing a safe, visible, and accessible pedestrian greenway to the center main entry of the building. And of course, the fields and courts up top.
Jeff, does this alleviate some of the problems of congestion and traffic at the high school campus itself?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'll jump back. So we know that the schools are working with a consultant now. And they've studied several different options at the high school for traffic patterns. And we spoke to them in the planning of this. The short answer is yes. I think there would be some traffic changing, as far as the traffic flow changes that would improve this. We think sliding the entry further to what would be the east on the site to enter into Hillcrest will help with some of the traffic congestion to get back out to Daniels Farm Road. So yes, I think, this is the first swing at it, but I think there's a lot of opportunity here to make improvements. When you pull the building further back on the site, what ends up happening is you have further, you increase the queue length within the site itself. So it's taking it like onto the middle school site itself. So that alone is going to help with the traffic as well. So we think these are dramatic improvements. It certainly still needs to be studied. So, yep, great question.
Sorry, can I ask a follow-up to that?
Yeah.
So you're talking about pulling the traffic into where the current middle school is, but my understanding the plan was to leave the current middle school there as a swing school for a number of years. So
Sure.
this plan doesn't look bad, but it doesn't seem like it's taking into account the next 5 to 10 years of actually having a building sitting there.
Yeah, that is correct. So we didn't show a phasing plan. There certainly would be likely 2 to 3 different site phases during construction. And the biggest one would be the interim position between, moving out of the existing Hillcrest and into the new one. So yeah, your answer is correct. If you're going to preserve it for future swing space, the conversation that we had during the master plan, our suggestion would be to preserve the front portion of the building, not so the northernmost portion of the Hillcrest, because it has the most typical classroom spaces. So that's the strategy that we would employ. So it wouldn't be perfect. There would be an interim plan for a period of time, correct?
Right. My only point, aside from the building, is then you have two schools going there. So you have less parking than you're currently showing. We still have the other buildings still out on that road and double the amount of traffic coming in there. Maybe not double.
Yeah, maybe not.
More, right? Still two schools full of teachers
Yep.
and, well, hopefully not the students, right? Because it's elementary school and middle school, but two schools full of teachers and less parking spaces.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct that we're, for a period of time, whatever that time may be, if that's the choice to use that as swing space, there will be kind of duplicative traffic patterns. We think the best opportunity is to pull the new building as far back as possible and leave the front portion of the Hillcrest. So we believe that there are going to be some sacrifices, like you may lose the relocated soccer field for a period of time when you do that, because that may be temp parking. It may be, drop-off lanes.
Well, I mean, at some point, we're going to need parking somewhere, right? Because we already have high school kids unable to find
Right.
where to park, so taking away more spots doesn't seem logical. Okay, I'll move on and say most of the questions for after, except for this, when you said the soccer field. Is that built into the pricing that we're looking at here? Is the fields part of this, or is it strictly the building?
It's all the site improvements that you see and the building.
So it is including the fields.
Correct.
Now, is that field turf or is it grass?
That's natural grass.
Okay.
That's the one that's called the pit. That's where they, on the backside, on the down.
No, the new one.
Oh, no. The
Yeah,
new
I
one's-
know what the old one is.
Oh,
I
I
was
was like, that's the pit.
more worried about building another turf field.
Sure, absolutely. And I didn't say it. If there's questions as I move along, obviously feel free to ask.
I just follow
Yeah, yeah.
Scott's asking some really good questions. Because the picture of the present
Yep, I'll go back.
versus not.
Vicki, can you pick up the microphone?
Does this mic work?
Yeah.
Hello. So the present Hillcrest is not shown on this document, right?
Yeah, I put it up on the slide. Unfortunately, it's an animated slide, so you only see the last
Yeah, is it on?
animation. But it's on the screen.
It's on page 6 where the existing site
Yeah,
conditions,
I can go
right?
back to that one, yeah. This?
I think it would be helpful if, sort of, if you could make a slide and show where the existing school is and then show where the new school is going to be.
Sure.
On the same slide, so you can see
Yep.
how much room really doesn't exist because you've got the existing school there.
Yeah, so I know this one isn't in the printout because it's overlaid with the new, but so I'll separate this out. There's room to slide it either north or south in that field. And I think the intent to use it as future swing space, we weren't planning to use the entire building.
So let me just ask a question about
Yeah,
that.
sure.
Because I'm not sure. I think Booth Hill is what the Board of Ed is looking at as next school.
Yep.
I've, made the suggestion that we should be looking at Madison next. I don't know where Madison is in the playbook here, how far down it is, but obviously that is a middle school. Are we looking to renovate that or to build as new for Madison?
So
What was-
that's a good question. So we didn't. So we showed options for both renovate as new and new. I think that would need further analysis. There was not a definitive answer on that.
Okay,
piece, yeah.
because if you're going to build a new school at Madison, where are the kids going,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you're going to need a space, which I assume would still be Hillcrest,
But you would need the whole building.
and you'd need the whole building.
But you wouldn't need the pool,
Right.
right?
No,
They're not-
no,
so
but
you-
they're not going to have the pool no matter what, right? That pool
Right,
space
so-
is gone. So
Still need every part.
you'd need classroom space, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just, again, planning ahead.
Sure.
For, I don't have I'm not a fortune teller, I always say that to everybody, but I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know really what school is going to be done
Right.
next.
Yeah.
We're hoping to get Hillcrest over the finish line here first. But those are just concerns, and they're concerns. So,
Conceivably, we could, so the Madison Middle School, you could conceivably build towards the rear if you wanted to, in a similar fashion to this. Or if you recall back to, it was mostly on the elementary schools, we had shown how we could add and renovate buildings, so you would build a portion of an addition to the existing building and use that as swing space. So there's a couple different options other than what, moving everybody over to this building as well. So those would all really want to be studied to make sure you're getting what's the best value.
those are future discussions, of
Sure.
course, but
Yep.
keeping in mind, Hillcrest as it exists now and how that's going to play with the other buildings that may be done.
Yeah, we definitely looked at it, and on the slide that's on my computer, luckily the utility infrastructure that comes into Hillcrest is north of the pool but south of like the band. So what I'm saying is you can safely remove kind of the portion south of the mechanical room to give you a little more breathing room, which is the pool essentially. So that's kind of what we have shown on this slide that's not up there now, but duly noted. I'll make sure that we get a graphic showing you the overlay of the existing Hillcrest and the proposed.
Thank you. And do you know how much the fields cost? Reason I'm asking is because if we're keeping the other school, let's just say hypothetically, we won't have the room to spare for the fields, and saying that, let's just say that the fields are going to cost $2 million.
Yeah.
Just by the nature of the fact of how much everything goes up each year, bonding now for $2 million for fields that we won't get to for 10 years, if we're keeping the middle school partially, just doesn't make sense long term.
Just remember that we're only authorizing
No,
the bond in the amount that would cover the entire project, but we don't issue any bonds until that work is done. So even if the fields are 5 years out, there would be a temporary note when the work is done, and at the end of that year, they would be
I
bonded.
completely get that. I would just hate to. As you know, I hate having bonds sitting out there just
Well,
waiting for the day to be used.
The one thing about this project that's going to be different, and I wanted to touch on this when that was done, is the reason why the bond has to be for the entire project now and what it means in reimbursement. And I do want to revisit that process before we vote, because I think it's very important for the public to understand why we're looking at $142 million for this build. Let's go back to the site specifics and the project itself, and then we'll revisit that.
Then I have one last
ahead.
question, and this might be a dumb one. Where are the bathrooms?
Out to the left, Scott?
No, I mean, I'm looking at
no,
a
you
gym
mean-
and it's a perfect square. There's no locker rooms. There's
Yeah, there's
is it just that this is more high level and they're somewhere in there?
they're definitely in there because we've had.
I mean, you have tiny rooms in here. You have lots of little things, just
we've
none of them
had-
are bathrooms.
It's a great question, and we get a lot of questions from faculty and staff on that as well. And we had a lot of conversations related to the amount of bathrooms, the type of bathrooms, where they're located. So they're all in the educational specification, and when we get to the conceptual plan, I can point out where they're strategically located in that conceptual plan. Absolutely. Yep. It's a good question because we get it all the time, honestly.
It's a question.
Yeah. So I'm gonna.
Can I ask a question about
Yeah, sure.
how close to the property line does the building go? You said you were going to push it more towards, I believe, towards the property line because it's in a pit. But it would be helpful to show the boundaries of the property
Yep.
as part of this, because, I mean, I can drive by that place and I have no idea if this thing is going to fit or not.
I had zoomed in on that slide in order to, so you could see what's happening on the site plan. We are a significant distance away from, talking about down here. I can get it. I'll give this to you. So the property line is down here.
Right.
And then that's the storage.
How many feet is it from the building to the property line? 100 feet?
Several hundred feet, yeah. I can get you exact
In the
dimensions.
future, so in the future, if there was a need for an addition or some sort of modification, we have the ability to spread out and go that way?
Absolutely, yep.
That would help future-proof the building.
Yep, that's a good, we can show that as well, yep.
Jeff, there's also maintenance garages on the backside of that piece of property
Yeah.
where they have field maintenance equipment.
So we're probably, I'm eyeballing it now, but we're about 150 feet away from that maintenance building. Yeah. So that's where so the conceptual plan that we'll walk you through takes advantage of the sloping down. So there's a main story that has all the, I'll go over it in the plan and I'll walk you through it. But, so I think because the proposed concept, and again, this is just a concept, it can be much more compact if you go multi-level, which we're proposing. It gives you an opportunity to pick up some real estate, to add parking, to add fields, to add other components, add additions in the future, so. Okay, so we left off. So this slide here, and let me see if I can reorient this on the page 10. So this shows the building in yellow, and we have more detailed plans or colored plans for the building itself. But the intent of this slide is to show the site improvements. So the opportunity here for the site improvements are, a reconnection with the outdoors. So we've certainly seen this over the last 3-4 years. Outdoor educational spaces, making sure that there's a pretty strong and significant relationship between the curriculum and outdoor learning. So we want to make sure that we identify areas on the plan and take advantage of that. And that's what essentially this building does. And the areas that are identified in the kind of that light cyan color indicate possible opportunities for outdoor learning. The other piece that obviously we need to comply with as you move forward is the school safety and infrastructure guidelines, and security, access control, and visibility is paramount, obviously, in today's educational facilities. And placing the administration component, which is in the yellow rectangle, with good visibility to all the parking and incoming visitors is key. So this concept does that, and also making sure that you have a controlled and secure entry vestibule that pushes all the visitors into a secure area as well. So those are some very basic concepts that are incorporated into the conceptual plan. And what I'll do is I'll walk you through the floor plans and then highlight some of the key advantages from an educational perspective. So I think I have let's see, I have an enlarged plan. So what we're proposing here is on the bottom portion of this slide, think of it as a small learning community. So in middle school, we had a lot of conversations with educational pedagogy and team teaching and the philosophies. And that's what the lower portion of the floor plan represents. Is you can arrange it any way you want, but 6, 7, and 8 are stacked with equal access to the shared spaces, to media center, art, auditoriums, the gym, all of the support spaces. So that's the arrangement in this particular concept. And what I'd like to do is zoom in to the main level floor plan. So as you enter the building and throughout the building, to answer your question, and I don't know if you can see, there's no way you're going to be able to see that cursor because I can't even see it. There's gray areas on the plan, that's all the toilet areas. And typically those toilet facilities are tucked into the interior corners of the building because that's the area that doesn't get any natural daylight, and nor does it need it because of the function. So you'll see that there's a multi-fixture toilet facility in each half of the grade level learning community. So you have 2 bathrooms in each of those learning communities, and then you also have multi-fixture toilet rooms adjacent to the gym, adjacent to the multi-use kind of auditorium space and all the art. So the intent here with the arrangement of the building is that the public spaces would be in the front portion of the building so that you could easily, during nighttime community evenings, easily separate out the building. You have all the toilet facilities, you can separate all your HVAC, you can easily separate without having the community travel into the educational aspect. So I hope that, Scott, answers some of the questions related to the toilets. What also is probably difficult to see on the plan is we're very thoughtful and incorporated kind of an all universal toilet rooms adjacent to the multi-fixture toilet rooms. So it gives you the opportunity to arrange facilities any way you wish. So there's plenty of room, plenty of program. It's incorporated into the educational specification, and I think it's a wise thing to do to provide several different options, and it's also supported in today's current building code or upcoming building code.
And all of the estimates for costs in all of these flexible things are tied into it because it's based on square footage and the fixtures you would need, not necessarily, where the toilets are and all that.
Yeah, it's based on, so the estimates that we were giving you, several months ago were based on square footages. We're now taking this plan and going and saying, okay, this toilet room is costing this much for this location. So all of it is included in your cost estimate.
So even though the plan might change and it might look different than this picture, the costs that we're having should cover the project.
Yes, absolutely. The reason for that is that the floor plan that I'm showing you with all 3 levels is at the allowable area that we've identified for the state reimbursement and is based on, and that's what the square footage costs were based on. So we're very confident that that covers this plan and any, the design is certainly going to evolve based on, there's going to be a whole host of other, should this thing proceed and whoever, works on it, there's going to be a whole host of conversations related to design aspects, fields, parking, phasing, all of those components. So some of the key ingredients were the separation of the public spaces up front so that you can provide that accessibility, and the private spaces more towards the rear. That helps also with security. We talk a lot about, there's an acronym, CPTED, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. So just being thoughtful about the placement of your public spaces up front, where the students are for the large portion of the day in the classrooms, a little further back. You can start to layer in doors, compartments, in other words, into your building. That adds another layer of safety in addition to all the technical components related to safety that would certainly be included. So their building is arranged with this main circulation corridor identified in the arrow 2, bless you, that provides equal access for all grade levels to these shared areas. And then it could also be connected through what's called the social stair. So just imagine, I showed you that view where the hill kind of slopes down. We're trying to be thoughtful and take advantage of that. So that hill could slope down, that could be stairs that lead to one of the grade level learning communities. So being thoughtful about the placement, at least conceptually, that's kind of what the vision of this plan had included. And then certainly spent a lot of time when we were talking about the programmatic functions on future-proofing. I don't know who used that term, but making sure we future-proof the types of spaces, the size of spaces, and the scalability of the spaces, because they're going to change. So that's we've identified those areas and those spaces on this plan, and you see a lot of, if you really study, you see a lot of dotted plans and walls that could be fixed or could be mobile, so that you can scale the spaces depending upon the curriculum as the curriculum evolves. So here's a more detailed plan of, on the left side, the use space, or the auditorium with the stage surrounded by orchestra, band, music, the planetarium that we're replicating. Robotics and tech ed are a huge portion of we spend a lot of time on that piece too, so making sure that the curriculum is forward-thinking as well. And then on the right side, you have your areas like your kitchen, your cafeteria, and your gym. So being thoughtful about that placement, and if you study the site, the conceptual site plan, making sure that the utilities and access to those spaces are easily accessible from a maintenance perspective as well. So we mentioned the planetarium. That was an important piece we talked about, making sure that it becomes a flexible use space. So that's written into the ed spec. The auditorium, Antonia kind of spoke to this multi-function space that could be scalable. That's what it could look like. That's how it's arranged planimetrically. So it has, as you can see in the different shapes on the screen, it could take on several different proportions as the needs arise. And the same thing with the gym cafeteria portion. So the view on the left side of this slide shows a gymnasium opening into a cafeteria. This is something that we're working right now on a project in Norwalk, where they wanted the scalability of the space with a large folding partition to either have all school events, large community events, or when they don't need that size space, it could function as smaller spaces like the normal cafeteria and gymnasium. So working those concepts and future-proofing spaces like that into the cost estimate and the educational spec are built into this plan. And then lastly, I kind of touched upon the arrangement, and I guess I'm stealing a little bit of Antonia's thunder here, but sorry. The grade level learning communities, we've also spent a fair amount of time talking about it from a programmatic function, but typically you have 2 teams per grade level with some shared spaces, like your science labs, your flex labs, your specialized education. So instead of building 2 of everything, we're thoughtful about the placement of the shared spaces so that we can take advantage of them. And that's what this arrangement shows, and that's what's, again, built into the educational specification. And as I mentioned before, layering the building with security, these small learning communities could easily be separated from the rest of the building during events and lockdowns and things like that. Unfortunately, things that we have to think about in today's environment. So that covers the kind of a very high level on the concept. I think most have been following along certainly with the costs. I can walk you through and the structure of this piece. So I am now on page 16. You probably are better to see it on the printed handout. But the top portion of the left spreadsheet talks about the max allowable area, your existing building. So it gives the basic statistics. You're building a building for 826 students, which is the highest enrollment, and that would occur in 2029-2030 school year. The middle portion of the costs, and this gets back to, Scott, a couple of your questions, what's included. So all the site improvements, all the parking improvements, all the fields, certainly everything in the building. We've included the possible building demolition in the costs of the existing school. So you have it covered. If you chose to use it as phasing, then you don't spend those. So what's important on this number and in the grant application number is we don't want to go back for more, right? You want to make sure that this number, once you get it through the state, you don't have to spend all of it. You can spend none of it if you don't want to, but you don't what we want to make sure is this is a conservative approach to planning your building. So I'll talk to some of the other soft costs included in this, but so the middle portion of that spreadsheet includes, site, building costs. The green lines are premiums for things like geothermal fields and for improvements to possible PV on your roof. So those are if there's obviously a movement and a focus on net zero buildings or net neutral buildings from an energy perspective. Those are the premiums and the costs that are folded into this to allow that to happen on this building. There's some other programs out there that are new that I'll go over in a minute. You may already be familiar with them, but that's the middle portion. So it's all the building and site costs. So a construction cost, if you were to build this building today, is $106,900,000, right? 106,901, 763. There's, and I might have explained this before, if you take the building off the site, turn it upside down and shake it, everything that comes out is your soft costs, your tables, your chairs, your phones, your architects, everything related to non-physical fixed space is built into soft costs. Those costs are typically about 19.5% of your overall budget. So in this case, it's about $20.8 million. We also spoke to about the phasing and logistics, about temp parking, and you're going to have fences and separation. Are those costs covered? Yes, we typically have seen a premium. We've built in about a 1.3 premium on that piece for some temporary phasing and logistics. Okay, so when you talk about construction costs and soft costs, you add those two together. That's total project costs. That number is $129 million, right? Now, the state is going to require you to escalate your project to the midpoint of construction. So we're planning midpoint of construction. If you were to proceed with the grant application, it was approved with the referendum, and you designed it starting, the middle of or the end of the year or the beginning of next. The midpoint of construction would be about midpoint of 2026, right? So June 2026. So that's the entire project, including soft costs, is escalated at 4.5% per year. So that's a total of compounded. It's a 9.2% escalation. So escalation, it's an eye-popping number. It's $11.8 million, but that's a piece that the state is going to be looking for. So when you put all that together, it's $140 million, 962,823. So that's the number that we've been showing and explaining to the community. The very bottom portion, and this slide was back in April 8th of this year, your reimbursement for new construction as published was 24.29%. So meaning the state's going to give you 24% of every dollar you spend here, less some ineligible costs, which are relatively minor. We're, again, conservative on that number. That's what that last ineligible allowance is, that 2.8 gets added back in, because sometimes Dave's going through it now. This isn't eligible, that's not eligible. There's a list a mile long that they use. So based on our history, we've seen it around 1%, 2%, so we're being conservative here. So the cost to Trumbull back in April 8th is $109. I'm going to skip that slide because that's soft cost summary. So if you have questions, I'll go back to that one. The projected cost with the House Bill, I think it was 5506, the special legislation at 44% reduces that estimated cost to Trumbull to $81 million. So that delta is around $28 million. So that special legislation and the requirement as written says that you must have a complete grant application in by December 1 of this year. So all that means is you submit your grant application now, you have to have your referendum results in by that point. Otherwise, that piece is null and void. You basically go back to the 24%. So that's a piece that changed from, I think, some of the previous presentations I had. I'll stop there if you have questions. Yeah.
Just a quick overview, to refresh our memories and for people watching at home who are vested in watching this project develop.
Sure.
Every community has a certain reimbursement rate. When we renovated the high school, a renovate like new garners a larger reimbursement rate than a new build because you're using existing footprints and things like that. So at the time that we renovated the high school, I believe our reimbursement rate was 32% for eligible costs.
Right.
The fact that Sarah Keat and the administration were able to negotiate to get us on that list for 44% reimbursement for a new build is a huge boon to the town. And it is our money and our tax dollars coming back to us, and we can have lots of discussions about that. But that's a significant savings. The number that we would save, an additional $27 or $28 million, is a lot, but that's almost half of the cost of the project. So for a new build estimated at 140 million to come in closer to 82, that's significant. So I think as we're talking about the process and we remind people that the numbers are staggeringly large, that this is a project that will last for a very long time, and what we stand to gain by getting through to referendum. And I'll go through the process again when you're all done with your presentation, but thank you.
Sure. So do you have questions, Chair? Yep.
Just looking through this, I just can't tell. So this is a question for understanding.
Yeah.
The site improvements, is that taking into account any water mitigation that we have to do for adding impervious surfaces?
Yeah,
especially
stormwater.
going down
Absolutely.
into a slope. I don't want to impact the neighborhoods behind.
Mhm.
And are we putting solar panels on the building?
So the green lines that I indicated, as far as carbon neutral net zero premium, that's to be studied and analyzed. If you want to spend the dollars there, can you afford it? Can you do heat pumps and combination of heat pumps and PV? So the answer is, I guess, maybe. There's premiums in there for different systems that give you the option for PV, geothermal, heat pumps, whatever systems. They all have their kind of pluses and minuses.
Sure.
Does that make
Okay.
sense?
And my question is not to be answered today, but it will be a question later.
Yeah.
Is the cost to run this building, along with those studies that you'll want to do, right? There's an offsetting cost, right? You put in solar that costs X dollar, but you don't have to pay X number in electricity, right? There's studies and upgrades that are worthwhile if it means long-term net zero for cost, not. Thank you.
Vin?
You would. Yeah. So the reason why I was kind of not directly answering your PV question is because a lot of communities have done PPA agreements versus owning them, power purchase. So that analysis is kind of still ahead of you guys, is still ahead of this project, but makes sense. Yep. And we certainly can and will provide operating cost information so that you can understand that delta too.
Vin had a question for you.
Oh, yep.
Does the soft cost reflect any reuse of anything from the existing Hillcrest?
It does not.
So theoretically, it could be improved, the 20 million could be 15.
Reduced, yes.
Reduced, something.
Well, then keep in mind, if we use the building, we need that stuff to stay too.
Oh, I'm just looking at of how they figured the number, that's
Yeah,
all.
no, that's fair.
There's absolutely, and where in past projects and through my experience, you've seen that most savings is like if there's areas of the building that you've just recently improved, FF&E, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, that can easily be relocated and saved. That's a piece that's in the soft cost, so that's a great question. Yep.
Okay, and one more question. Usually a project of this size or a big project has a contingency number that's assigned there, but I don't see one. So is there a contingency number in this as an estimate?
Absolutely. So great question. The owner's contingency is a detailed line item in the soft cost, and that number is right now is at $6.7 million. So that is about almost 7% of your construction. Yep. I know it's hard to see up there, and we can certainly provide this so that you can see it, see what the soft cost detail is. The major components in the soft costs are the design team. If you're going to hire an OPM, you don't have to, but if you do, that's covered in there. All your furniture, fixtures, and equipment, all your technology equipment, any kind of, not playground, but site improvement equipment. That's all part of what we consider soft costs. Moving costs, all of those can be reimbursable. So that's what's included in there.
Go ahead, Paul.
Jeff, a couple of questions. What is the projected economic life of the new building once completed? Do you have any
Yeah,
thoughts on that?
I can give you, the overall longevity of the building certainly is dependent on the maintenance of it, but you're talking 60, 70, 80 years for at least. Building systems, depending on the type of systems that you install, like mechanical systems, 25 to 30 year. They're getting better because some of the more contemporary systems that are more heat pump and less, they have less moving parts. That life cycle is starting to increase in years. Things like roof, we typically ask for a 30-year warranty, so we're looking, roofs are typically 30, 35 years. I know, back a decade ago, it was like about 20. So I guess it varies on the major systems in your building, but the overall structure implication, the structure itself is several decades, 60, 70, 80.
And do you have any, or can you gather any statewide data as to where we stand with regard to the current age of our building relative to the rest of the state?
We can certainly gather that. I think it's the 10th. I forget the form number that the.
If you could, I think that would be
Yeah,
helpful.
yeah.
And how about where we stand relative to new junior high school buildings being constructed currently over the last couple of years, possibly, relative to the per square foot cost? Are we in the middle? Are we high? Are we low?
For the projected square foot
Yeah.
cost. So we used historical averages for this isn't the extreme high end, and this isn't the low end. It's the median of what we see for historical averages. With that said, the last 2.5, 3 years, we've seen, I think it's 31 point something % increase in construction costs alone, right? This is certainly leveled out in the market right now, but the cost per square foot that you're seeing in the charts that I went over is reflective of that premium already. So you're in today's market, or I guess a few months ago market, as far as that crazy escalation that we've seen over the last 2 years is in there, but you then also have your 4.5% moving forward. So I mean, admittedly, these are eye-popping numbers, but it's better to make sure that you're accurate and conservative now with that, and that's what those reflect.
Good, thank you. Last question. Is the inclusion of a planetarium common or unusual? And do you know what the cost of that particular facet of the plan is?
I don't know the exact cost because we're estimating the detail of that now. There's that I am aware of, I think there's 2 or 3, and one that's actually more recently built, and I think it's in Glastonbury. So it's not typical.
There are only 2 or 3 statewide?
Oh, no, that I'm aware
That you're
of,
aware of.
that are recent. The most recent one that I visited, I think
Why
it
does
was,
Glastonbury always come up?
They always do.
but they have one, and I think that building had to have been built in the last 7 or 8 years. So I can find out some more on that too.
And you can find out the approximate cost of our inclusion of one?
Oh, yeah, you're definitely going to have that, yeah.
So I believe that the equipment for the planetarium was donated recently. We
That was a
looked at
year
that,
ago,
and it was
right?
a year ago, and that it was discussed that if we were to move, that it was portable. So that's a nice thing.
Would be
Nice season. Right. I just want to acknowledge that Keisha Palmer from Robinson and Cole has joined us on Zoom. She's our bond counsel, so she just popped on. I'm not sure we're going to be able to get her up on the monitors, but she is here at the desk. I turn her around so she can wave in a little bit. But I just wanted to acknowledge that she's joined the meeting as well. Any other questions on where we are as far as the project and where the estimates have come from? Can we talk a little bit about the project timeline and the process for the grant from the state and how the process goes? Because when you commit to building a project like this, it's actually really backwards. We have to commit to spending the whole amount of the project before we know what it actually is going to be and how much they'll reimburse. So it's kind of nice to be able to understand that timeline.
Absolutely. I won't spend too much time, and I'll answer your question because I do have a schedule. 2 really important programs to the community, Eversource, rebates, pretty significant on a building of this size, several hundreds of thousands of dollars, and maybe even around 700 plus. So that's a piece. And then the other piece that is somewhat newer to municipal buildings is the IRA. We have 2 clients communities that are pursuing this, and this is millions of dollars of rebates, direct pay to the municipality. If this is of interest and this moves forward, I would strongly encourage early interaction on this piece because it's the town that needs to make sure that that all works. But it's actually very real dollars, and in a building of this size, it could be a fair amount. So,
Can I ask one question on that?
Where in the process do you have to move forward with that?
our recommendation would be once you understand that you have a project and you're moving forward, my strong suggestion would be early in planning, like when you're assembling the entire team, your design team, your OPM and building committee, you start that conversation right before design, because what it means to the designers that would be involved is some of this stuff has to be specified, made in America. There's certain types of systems and equipment that you can really take advantage the earlier on that you make sure that you look at this program. So
at the end of the meeting, should we all agree that we're moving this project forward and you go to town council? I think that that's going to be important to highlight for them, since the building, the building committee is under their purview.
Yeah, it's so we're seeing momentum. Certainly private institutions have taken advantage of it.
And are those rebates coming when we purchase the items to use, or is it when the project is completed?
It's in place, I believe. So when in operation, so when completed.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. Maria, would we have any way to use, and I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyways, be able to use the rebates because they're coming from the building, to make any early payments on the bonding?
Usually we can make down payments on the bonds. They're 20 years and they're fixed that way.
Separate question then. Is there any way to set up a separate account for those rebates to go in to strictly use them for paying the bond?
Other bonds, yes. Yes. You can set it up
Okay.
in a separate fund.
Sorry.
Maybe Keisha can address that if she has anything else to add.
Keisha, did you hear the question? Hold on 1 second. I got to figure out how to try that now.
I did not. Would you mind repeating it for me?
Scott, can you repeat that question?
Well, but I'll try.
Oh, wait, let me try. So the question is, after the project is completed, if we have rebates for UI incentives or IRA, and the money comes back at the completion of the project, can we put that money into a contingency account or a special account to pay down to specifically pay for the bonds?
The short answer is yes, you can. Rebates sometimes get a little bit of a special treatment. As you may all know, when you authorize the bonds, typically it is inclusive of any grants in aid of the project, but rebates are not treated as grants because they're not guaranteed. So when the rebates come back to the town, you typically have freedom to decide what to do with it, including setting it aside to pay debt service on the bonds.
Did that answer your question? Scott said he doesn't like the answer, but he'll accept it. Thank you. Okay.
Well, actually, let's say we finish the building and we haven't spent all the money filling it, right? All the soft costs are, I'm probably using the wrong term. Hypothetically, we could use those rebates to then fill the building
Yes.
And not bond.
and not bond for the
Yes.
money. Okay. That's where I was aiming to get to. I just took a little while.
Okay. Any other questions on that? All right.
Sorry,
Go ahead,
that took
Jeff.
a little longer to get to my schedule. So the last, page 19 is a high-level schedule. So I'll give you some key dates. So you submit the grant application by June 30th of this year. When you have your referendum, you submit that result, assuming it's successful. It should all that go forward, obviously, by December 1st of this year. There's a priority list that comes out December 15th of every year that lists complete grant applications with the amount enumerated in your referendum. That list goes through the legislative process, and typically it gets approved in the spring session, which was just a few weeks ago now, and you get a letter from the state saying your grant's approved. So that's the grant process. You can wait until all that's complete. You have many options. You have 2 years to get a shovel in the ground after that letter. So that's kind of the time frames that you need to pay attention to. So what's below that yellow line on this slide is the blue is the design phase. So some communities, after they know that it's passed referendum, they will then start beginning to assemble their design team and get going in anticipation of approval from the state. Some communities do this entire process before they even submit to the grant to the state. That's not this group. You could also wait until December 15th and then start that process, or you could wait until you get the final. So it's really up to the community to identify that process. But what it typically takes is about 16 to 18 months to design a building of this size from a design team, soup to nuts, all the consultants. And it takes anywhere from 18 to 20 months to build a building of this size. So you can strategically kind of align these things so that you're finishing the building and filling the building with FF&E so that you can begin a fall, the new school year. You can stagger it. There's many different options in there. This plan is just showing you kind of the lengths of time that it would take, and some of the activities. So that's kind of the schedule in a very basic summary. I'm happy to answer any more detailed questions that you have.
Go ahead, Scott.
And I don't know who this question is for, to be honest. We have a number of $140,962,823, which I believe is the number that was submitted to the state and for our reimbursement. And the bill says that the cost can't exceed that amount, but we're asking for more.
It's $142,375,000. Dave, do you have we had discussed where that was the number that the board.
Bonding costs, yes, and I had a 1% for bonding costs, financing costs.
Does that impact, and I, again, don't know who this is to.
Our reimbursement?
Correct, because it says that it can't cost more. Does the bonding cost count in that number that they're looking at or not?
So the bonding authorization is our number, what we think that project will cost and what we're putting forth for the total project. So if Maria's including the bonding costs are not reimbursable as far as I'm aware.
Correct, but I mean from the calculation, because the bill says the cost of the project cannot exceed $140 million, that number. Do they exclude the bonding cost that we're talking about now, or are they?
So
going
Maria,
to
when
say
the
that we
state
just meet
looks
the
at it,
bill?
if we leave the number 142, does that give us a problem with the state?
I don't know, no.
Keisha, did you hear that question?
I did.
Hold on.
I don't know the answer to that because I typically don't deal with the reimbursement from the state. That portion I generally don't see. However, I think if the question is how do you pay for issuing your bonds, typically you would pay for that out of premiums. Those are still, we're still in a market where investors pay a premium in order to buy the bonds because they want a little better interest rate. And so typically you have financed the cost of issuing the bonds out of premiums and not directly out of the par amount of the bonds, meaning the principal amount of the bonds.
Okay, so the question is, the number that we have in the bond resolution is 142 million, but the project is 140 million. Maria has included the cost of the bonding in the resolution. We don't jeopardize our state grant application by including it in the bond resolution.
Typically what the state asks is that your bond authorization covers at least the entire cost of the project. I've never encountered anyone getting turned down because they've authorized more than the amount, but that is not something that I specifically am asked to address. I'm not usually asked to address that because it's a little bit outside of what I do.
Would that be considered part of the soft cost as well?
No, my guess would be that it would be just considered an ineligible cost. Anything above the grant number is going to be an ineligible cost anyway. So,
So it
Okay,
wouldn't
again,
be-
I'm just taking the verbiage which says costs not to exceed that
Right.
number. I just want to make sure we aren't jeopardizing ourselves over 1.5 million, which again, I know is a lot of money, but compared to 142 million, relatively not.
Yeah.
And I don't know who wants to be nitpicky on a given day, which is why I'm doing it today.
If we move forward with the 142, Keisha, and we find out before it goes to the town council that the amount is incorrect and would jeopardize us, can they adjust the amount? Did you hear that? Yes,
They can
that she
reduce
says that the town council can adjust the amount, so if we've made an error, and can we find out that answer then between now and when the town council meets, Keish?
I'm sorry, are you asking me? for
Yeah, would we be able to find out that answer?
I think that's more of a question for Dan and not for me.
Okay.
Because it's unrelated to the.
That's fine.
I was going to say, I think that's our attorney question.
I will follow up with Dan.
And I have one more question if we can.
Go ahead, Scott.
When does our high school bonding come off? Okay.
More.
I've been in town for 10 and it was done before I moved in.
It was finished when,
Maybe 10 years, maybe? I'll look it up. I don't have it with me.
okay. Any other questions? Go ahead, Vin.
Based on the timeline, will we incur any costs for the design phase before the bond is actually implemented or approved? In other words, is everything going to fall into the bond and be paid out of the bond? I mean, we've had projects where we've upfront paid for like an analysis cost or some sort of consulting cost before a project was done. So I'm just asking because I wouldn't want to see something come before us to say in, let's say, December or November.
I think they already did. That was the 150.
But that's it. There's nothing else.
yeah, we've been paid for the master plan, and there was a proposal associated with the grant application, but that I think is already.
Was played out of Board of Ed.
So the timeline here, it wouldn't make any difference as long as the project gets approved.
Right, yeah, all the costs associated with those blue lines are in your overall cost, yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions on the project itself? Okay, so just to review, there's a motion before us, a resolution appropriating $142,375,000 for the planning, design, demolition, construction, renovation, equipping and furnishing of a new Hillcrest Middle School and authorizing the issuance of $142,375,000 dollars in bonds of the town to meet said appropriation and pending the issuance thereof, making of temporary borrowings for such purpose. That means we're not spending any money tonight. That we are authorizing a project that could cost up to $142 million. And there is a grant application that would allow us to move, if we vote to authorize this bond, it would then need town council approval. And then following town council approval, that would allow us to put it on the November ballot for referendum. That means the taxpayers get to decide whether or not this project moves forward. If the project moves forward, we have been guaranteed by the state an increased reimbursement rate at 44% of the total cost of the project for an out-of-pocket cost of just under $82 million for a $142 million project. Is everybody understanding what we're authorizing tonight? Go ahead, Scott.
I understand what we're voting on. I'm going to be voting against it, and I'm going to give a reason why. I just want to make sure I do it before we vote. I'm not sure when we were
Go ahead
going
and
to.
give your reason.
Okay. I'm not against the school. I'm not against anything that was said here. I'm actually quite for the public being the ones to decide it. I'm against the order of it. The senior center has been in the works for, I don't know, I'm going to say 120 years because that's how old the old one is. And just personally, I cannot vote to move something to referendum, and I understand where the aim is to have them both in November. I just cannot put the school that came up a year ago ahead of a senior center that's been in the works multiple times over and over again.
I understand your point, and I agree that we 100% need to move forward with a senior center, community center. We also need a
Call
pool.
it what you will, yeah. Like
I totally agree that has been in the works, but this has been a project for them to get the master plan in place since I think Vicky took office, to get a master plan in place for the schools. And these renovations are things that we have been talking about and know that we need to do. Whether or not we knew that we were going to build a new middle school and that was the right place to start, I think that the master plan and the investment in the master plan has really shown that this puts us on track to bring our school system, our physical plants, up to the caliber that our schools perform at. And I think that whether we decide the order is correct or not, these projects, Hillcrest and what's to come after it, have to happen in some way, shape, or form. The opportunity before us to get 44% of our money back from the state, because those are our tax dollars as well, it would be nice to actually be able to recoup them for the town of Trumbull and for our students at this time. So I understand how you feel about the order. I think the magnitude of what this allows us to do would change my mind in that.
Sure.
But you're entitled.
And I get where you're coming from. I just not half, I don't know the number. There's a whole lot of our population that has nothing to do with the schools. They pay the same taxes that everyone else, and they deserve this, and I'm not willing to put them second.
Okay.
That's where I stand.
At this time.
And again, that's as a parent of.
Oh, no, I know. I know. I get it. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. I've read the resolution before us again. I'm going to ask Phyllis to take a roll call vote.
Microphone.
Vincent DeGennaro?
Yes.
Paul Timpanelli?
Yes.
Christina?
Yes.
Scott Seymour?
No.
Rosemary Seaman?
Yes.
Laney McHugh?
Yes. Keisha, will you be able to report to Dan that I did that correctly? That the bond resolution authorizing $142,375,000 passed 5-1.
We get a first or a second?
Yes, we did.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? All right. Moving on to the town council. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you all.
I just, again, want to notice how nice Dave looks. in a suit and tie, and the superintendent is not.
Summertime.
Yeah, he's summertime Dr. Semmel today.
Yeah, this is
Summer break
summertime.
Semmel.
Second. Hanging on your.
I got nervous.
We got that tie for Dave for his retirement.
Just in
to
time,
see.
Dave.
Like I
Just
should
in
wear
time.
it.
Aw. Going out on a high note, Dave.
Jeff, Antonia, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Couple little things to go before we can go home.
Something?
Oh, I'm good. No. I think she was trying to get my attention. I realized we still have a meeting to run.
That's okay. All right. We have year-to-date budget report expenditures and revenues and our fund balance to go over. Maria, any highlights we should be concerned about? Anything?
I think I brought up most of the possible supplementals going forward. It's the tax assessor, page 2. I will be coming for a supplemental, probably 115,000. Page 3, purchasing department, most likely 35,000 is over budget on his overtime, and I think that was brought up several times already. Some of the other items are the workers' comp on page 4. We'll still have to discuss workers' comp at some point, but that will be over budget. Hopefully, it looks like you can transfer from the other employee benefits.
Okay.
You'll see on the town hall account, there's some items over budget, like the program expenses. That had to do with the OSHA fine. As you know, we had an audit by OSHA. On page 5, the remediation for the OSHA, that's about 43,000. That's for various supplies, materials, various remediation infrastructure.
When is this as of?
As of yesterday. Well, actually, no, the agenda went out last week, so last Friday. The police department, page 6, so their overtime is over 119,000, but as you can see, they have enough in the full-time salaries to cover that. Salaries should be about 92% spent, and they're only 85.1.
I just want to note they added two more officers to the road this week.
Yep.
And Maria, I looked through this whole thing.
Yep.
I think you touched on almost everything every other month, right? Because they've been tracking over.
Yep.
Overall, though, just tell me if I'm mistaken, we're still going to run in a surplus, right?
On the police, yes.
No, as a whole. For
As a
our
whole,
town
yes.
side, we look
Yes.
like we're at 20. We have about 20% left to spend in a month.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you talk to that holiday expenditure number? In the
Yeah,
police
I'm
budget?
actually going to look into that. That has to, on the police department?
Yes.
I'm actually going to, I believe it's the training that you're looking at, that it's over budget by 59,000. That's the training account. I believe it has to do, it's the salaries when they go to training. It could be that because there was a contract
Yeah.
settlement
Yep.
and there were more officers training. But I saw that and I was going to research that further.
Got it.
Okay. So a bit of red in EMS.
EMS, they're incurring more expenses in collection and billing fees because they're also collecting a lot more. As you will see in their revenue, they're up to 2.3 million, I believe.
Okay.
The only other large ones, Public Works, building maintenance on page 10, most likely will need a supplemental on the building maintenance and equipment.
Was that the repairs here at Town Hall?
Yes, throughout all buildings.
Okay.
And I think the others are very small transfers that need to be done.
Education program expenses, is that is that transportation? That's transportation?
Yeah, the transportation is over budget. I have to, that's the busing through the non-public schools.
Oh, okay.
So I have to find out why is that over?
Were they billing incorrectly like they did to TPS?
I'm not sure.
Oh,
I'll have to find out from the Board of Ed.
okay. Anybody?
Parks, they have a few accounts over budget. We'll look into those in more detail.
Anybody have any questions for Maria? Go ahead, Scott.
I do on revenue, not on expenditures.
Okay.
Are you ready to move on to revenues?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Property tax. It looks like we're
Yeah.
about 25% under, and we're coming to a new bill
I
coming
was
out.
actually, I started looking at that. I need more details from the tax
Okay,
collector.
that just seems
Yeah.
right. It's not just in my mind.
No,
Okay.
it looks low. Since our collection rate is about 99%, yeah. Yeah.
With a month left before the end,
Well,
we should be closer to
This
what,
is as of
85,
April.
90?
This is as of April.
Oh, okay.
So it could be that April payment is not posted.
Yep. That makes
So,
more sense. I
right.
thought this was newer. That's
No,
on
no,
me.
it's April because we want to make sure all the journals are posted before, so we give it to you especially the revenues. So yeah, that was on my list to look into. So you'll see that in the state revenue, there's $1.5 million for special ed excess costs for $1.580 million. That's usually returned to the Board of Ed. That's why you see the big over budget. As you can see, the CS, we received another 531,000 more than we estimated. And the municipal revenue share sales tax, that was 929,000 that we didn't anticipate.
Do we have an estimate where Board of Ed is going to fall in at the end of the year?
I do not. We basically just fund whatever they spend for the week or the month.
Okay.
So I really don't know.
What's the difference between Board of Ed receipts and miscellaneous revenue for education?
I think miscellaneous is for some co-pays, insurance, or that kind of, some kind of, the main account is for tuition, attendance to our schools and agri-science. The miscellaneous, I believe it's anything like reimbursement for medical or, I'm
Okay.
not quite sure. It's small.
Yeah, but I mean, it shows received 9,000%. So it seems like it's way up over what we were expecting, which
Yeah,
I know it's not a large number,
Yeah,
but it's still
yeah.
abnormal.
yeah, yep. As you can see, EMS on page 2, they're about $1.8 million. I think when I looked today, I think it was $2.3 million. So they're way above what we budget for, and that's also why the collection fees and the billing fees are up, because they're collecting more. It's based on collections. I think Parks Department, they're up 559,000 from a budget of 550, and they have 2 months to go. I think that's it. Anybody has questions on that?
Paul? No? Scott?
My question is on the general fund. Sorry, I'm skipping ahead.
Yep.
Do we know where Parks stands on the supplementals that we gave them? Right, because they have to have it done by
Oh,
August.
I have something to report on that.
Okay.
So that was on the town hall account. There were 3 projects. There were 85,000 in the town hall account for improvements, which you will see on page. Oh no, you can see that they haven't used it. They haven't used it because they're not going to be able to finish the project. So we'll be coming back in July for this, the same 85,000. And the same thing for the senior center. So if you look at page 4. under Town Hall, well, more like page 5, sorry. Under capital outlay, there's 109,000 as a supplemental, and we have available 85,000. They're not able to do the project, so that 85,000 will stay, will go back to the general fund, and they'll have to come back in July or August. And if you look at senior center, the same thing. Page 12, you will see that we gave them 130,000, or you guys approved 130,000. And they're going to not be able to do those 2 projects, so that 130 will go back to the general fund. And they'll come back in July, August, whenever they can think they can finish the project.
Well, I mean, right. I mean, they could come back hypothetically July 1st, and then they have a whole year,
To finish.
14 months, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
correct.
Now, is every other project going to be done in time? Right, because we have a long list of supplementals that we did this year for a valid reason. I
Yes.
just want to, okay.
Yes, I think these were the only large projects that were initially going to be bonded, and they were not because this board decided that we would just fund them. Yeah, that was the only ones. The other ones were, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions on general fund balance or revenues or year-to-date? Okay. Then, if not, I will take a motion to accept the March 26th minutes. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Vinny. There is one correction. Justin was not there, but Rosemary was. We've decided we're going to keep her, so can we change that template? All right, we're all good then. Any other comments, corrections? That was a long one. You had a lot to say. And if there's no corrections, can I take that by unanimous consent? Okay. That side okay? All right. And then we also, may I have a motion to approve the May 9th? Scott and Vinny. Comments? Vinny is voting for Dave tonight. And Christine is voting for Marty. If no corrections, can I take this one by unanimous consent? Okay. Awesome. Then we have the mill rate special meeting for May 30th. Can I take a motion to accept those minutes? Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Scott. Any other questions, comments, corrections? All right. If not, can I take those by unanimous consent? All right. Very good. And then just a motion to adjourn. Scott's.
Oh, can I second?
Yes, you can. Scott and Christine. All right. Anybody not want to go home? All right. Thank you, everybody.